Okay, so as you just heard a couple months ago at the December meetup, when they were announcing the Lightning talks, Alan wanted someone to talk on Flexbox, and I didn't know Flexbox, but I wanted to learn it. So I thought, okay, I'll sign up for a talk, and that'll be good motivation. And so I think Brian Braun did something maybe similar with his animation project, and that kind of inspired me too. So just a little intro about myself. I'm Jay Schenk. And my background's in music, but these days, instead of practicing clarinet, I'm practicing programming and web development. And I'm enrolled in a program called Launch School. It's like a online program that teaches full stack web development. Launch School is the name of it. It's kind of a Rails and front end database, everything kind of put all together into a full stack curriculum. But today, I'm going to try to answer the question, why use Flexbox? And I don't have time to cover all the properties and syntax, so I'm going to just try to give you a taste of Flexbox, give you an idea of when you might want to use it and why, and then I'll provide some resources at the end if you do want to learn the syntax. So Flexbox is short for CSS Flexible Box Layout Module. So you can see why they shortened it, because that's a mouthful. But basically, it's an attempt to make responsive design easier and more intuitive, and solve a lot of long-standing CSS problems. Some of you may know there's also like a CSS grid specification that should be coming out soon. And in some ways, Flexbox has a similar philosophy, and I think the two will work really well once we have that as well. So just kind of, before we talk about Flexbox, here's just a few pain points that we deal with when we're doing CSS layout. For instance, sometimes we try to use floats for layout, but that wasn't really their original purpose. Their original purpose was more to have content flowing around an image, like in an article or blog post. So because of that, we have issues we have to think about with floats, like we always have to make sure we clear them with a clear fix or clear property or overflow property. So it's just a lot of overhead when we're having to think about floats. Responsive design often requires many media queries, so often we're writing a lot of styles for each device. It's almost like we have a separate style sheet for every screen size, sometimes it feels like, because we have to rewrite so many of the styles. If we're using inline elements for layout, we have white space that gets put in there that we have to deal with in various ways. And then finally, vertical alignment's often problematic. I remember when I was first learning CSS, and I think a lot of people experience this when they're first starting out. If you want to center something horizontally, that's easy enough. But then as soon as you want to center something vertically, all of a sudden you realize there's 20 different ways to do it, and you have to figure out which one to do it. So in a bit, I'm going to talk about how Flexbox makes some of these things easier. But before I do that, you may be wondering, can I even use Flexbox? And that's a question I had too before I learned this. And so here's the chart from Can I Use? And actually, browser support by modern browsers is really good now. So all this green means it's supported, and the lighter shade of green means it's supported, but there are some bugs present. So IE11, for instance, you do need to be aware of some bugs and compensate for those, but it is supported. And in fact, they say 97% of global users now have browsers that support Flexbox. All right, so I'm going to go through a few examples of when you might want to use Flexbox. So here I'm showing an example without using Flexbox. We have a div that we just want to get centered horizontally and vertically in the body here. And so there's many ways to do this. This is just one. I'm assuming for this example we don't know how much text is in that box in advance. It's dynamic. So for instance, one solution would be to set the body to relative positioning, the div to absolute positioning, and set the top and left to 50%. The problem is that pushes it a little too far down, a little too far to the right, so then we have to do a transform to push it back into the center. So when you look at this code, it's not very intuitive. Why do we have these negative margins? And it seems a little hacky. So let's see if maybe Flexbox provides an easier way to do this. And sure enough, we can do this in just 3 lines of code with Flexbox. And all we have to do is set the body to display flex, which makes it a Flexbox. We set justify content to center, and that centers the div horizontally. And align items to center, and that centers it vertically. So finally, we can vertically align an item in 1 line of code in CSS. So that's way easier. And some of you may be thinking, oh, well, I know Flexbox, and there's an even simpler way we can do this, even fewer lines of code, and you're right. We can do, in just a couple property changes, we can just set the body to display flex, and then the div we can just set to margin auto. And so with Flexbox, you can actually have auto margins vertically as well as horizontally. So when you're setting margin auto, it's setting automatic margins in every direction. So we can actually center this in the middle of our page with just 2 properties, which is pretty cool. All right, and then the next example, just a typical page. We've got a navigation bar at the top there, and there's an unordered list that has our navigation links. So one way to do this in Flexbox is we can set it as a Flexbox by setting display to flex. And then by default, its flex direction is row, which puts our list items in a horizontal row. And then there's a cool property called justify content, and here we're setting it to space around. And what that does is no matter what the screen size, it's putting equal space between those navigation elements and calculating that automatically for you. But you might be thinking, okay, that looks all right with this screen size, but once I get to mobile, those links are going to get kind of crammed together, and I'd rather have those arranged vertically. And Flexbox has a cool solution for that as well. All we have to do is change 1 property. We just set flex direction to column, and bam, we have a vertical menu instead of a horizontal one, just by changing 1 property. So we don't have to change the display property, for instance, or anything like that. So, next example. The other day I was browsing a website that looks something like this, where you have a series of steps. I've changed the text a bit here, but you have a series of steps, and you don't necessarily know how long the step's title is going to be in advance, right? Because each step's going to be a different length. So if you look at our pagination at the bottom, or navigation at the bottom there, we have different amounts of text in each one, and so our boxes are a different size. This looks okay on this screen size, but I was looking at this on my phone, and it looked like this. And so I was like, wow, that is really odd looking, that those 2 bottom navigation items don't match in their vertical height. And that was because, I looked at the code later, and they were using floats, right? So they're floating one of those items to the left, one to the right. But the problem was, because they didn't know how long the text for those steps was going to be, they couldn't just set a height for it. So it ends up looking kind of ugly like this, where the heights don't match. So I thought, well, I'm learning Flexbox. I think I saw a way that we could solve this problem with Flexbox. And so here's what I came up with. So what we can do is make that bottom navigation a Flexbox, and then that property there that I have the default comment by, I don't actually have to write that out, the align item stretch, because that's there by default. But what that align item stretch does is really cool, is it automatically takes the height of the largest element and has the other flex items match that in height automatically for you. And then I also played around with it some more. I added a couple more nested flex boxes, and that allowed me to vertically align that step 1 in the box as well, the text there. All right, final example. We're looking at an article here where we've got a header and a paragraph and then an image. And on desktop, sure, that's fine. I can see it all right. But when we go to a smaller screen size, our nice feline image here is pushed down pretty far. So when I first navigate to this on my phone, I can't really see the picture. I'd have to scroll. And let's say we really wanted to make sure our users saw that picture right away. Flexbox has a cool solution to this problem. We can actually change the visual order of our items. without changing the HTML. So for instance, we can just set the image to order -1, and that will actually put it before the other elements. So here I've done it in a media query so that when it's a smaller screen size, that image gets placed first. And how that works is each Flex item has a default order of 0. And so if you set an item to anything lower than 0, it will go first in order. All right, so that was a quick overview of why you might want to use Flexbox. I do have a number of resources I collected together at that link you can go to, and I'll post that on the meetup in Slack afterwards too. If you're interested in learning more about it, you can do that. Yeah, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to help with that now or afterwards too.
Have you done any experimenting with Grid and Flexbox together?
I haven't learned Grid yet, but I did look at Grid a little bit, and I noticed that some of the same terms they use as far as like having a start and an end to an axis, and how you can justify things was similar in some ways with Grid. So I feel like I'll have a good start to learning Grid after learning Flexbox because it seems like they have a lot in common.
Phil, have you done anything with Grid?
I have played around with Grid. I haven't gotten to great degrees with it. I mean,
It's perceived to be hand in glove, that they would work together, or they're mutually exclusive.
all of the above.
Well, the grid still does not have nearly the support that Flexbox does.
Till March.
Till March?
Till March.
It's gonna be quick.
It's going to be in March. Grid will be around in Chrome and Firefox at least. It's suspected Safari as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard that's the next big thing, that this year might be the year of Grid, CSS Grid, so something to look forward to.
Which is one of those things that kind of comes with web technology industry. As soon as you master Flexbox, get halfway to mastering Flexbox, the newest thing comes along. Right?
But I don't think Grid is gonna replace Flexbox.
No.
I think they're
In
gonna work
some
together.
ways. Yeah, I mean, it will, yeah.
But-
you guys are going to get me in my own lightning talk.
Yes, yes!
I mean, one thing maybe to add about that discussion is, from what I've heard, CSS Grid is supposed to be for overall page layout, is kind of its primary purpose, and Flexbox is more for components, like smaller components of a page. In general, that's what I've heard is the use case for each.
Yeah, totally.
You good?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So can we look at a deprecation someday of table?
Yeah, so that's maybe one of the goals of this, because yeah, sometimes to vertically align something, you have to use a table cell or something, which really doesn't make semantic sense. And
But even with a table, I think there will always be use cases for it.
Sure.
You have a data table.
right.
As long as you have data.
It's the display table, vertical line center. Middle. Thank you, middle. About the, and yeah.
Yeah, that's the part we're trying not to do anymore. Yeah.
We're so used to abusing our own, technology in ways that it was never necessarily meant for, but when you want to do things that nobody ever created mechanisms to do those, you have to use what you have, so.
Yeah, so if you go to these resources, one of the ones I linked to is called Solved by Flexbox, and Philip Walton put together a list of kind of CSS problems that have been problems for many years that are finally solved by Flexbox, so it's a good way to see that as well. Yes?
Do you think your music background has helped you with your coding?
Yeah, so he was asking, does my music background help with learning to code? And yeah, I think so in some ways. I mean, obviously it's not directly related, but actually in the launch school program I'm in, there's a lot of musicians, and one of the instructors said he's noticed a lot of musicians are successful in the program. And so some of us have been thinking, okay, maybe it's because as a musician you kind of have a attention to detail, and you've kind of developed a discipline of practicing a skill on your own, and being able to learn on your own. So I think there's some habits that are helpful even if the actual content's different. Yeah.
Beyond the habits, neuroscience absolutely proves that it benefits in all ways possible because it lights up every aspect of the brain, every neural pattern in the brain, and those skills are transferred to any problems.
Yeah. So he was saying that, yeah, when you, I think I've seen this too, like when you play a musical instrument or you're singing, yeah, it really lights up all the parts of your brain working together as you coordinate rhythm. And
And the sad thing is we've eliminated from our school systems what it benefits.
yeah, that is sad. Yeah, my wife's a music teacher, so I do hate to see that. All right, any other questions?
Thank you,
All
sir.
right, thanks.